Welcome back. Today I'm going to try to solve some puzzles on chess.com. If you're new to my channel and you don't know what I do here, I'm not like other chess YouTubers because I'm not a titled player and I'm not here to teach you how to play chess. I'm here to teach me how to play chess, and if you pick up something along the way, that's great. If you see something that I miss, feel free to leave it in the comments and try to explain something to me. I will appreciate it. Even if I don't understand it just yet, I hope to sink it into my brain and get it working, rolling around in there until it clicks. I'm actually doing much better in puzzles than I am in almost any other category, and I don't just mean the puzzle rating, which I think everybody's puzzle rating is a little bit higher than their rapid rating, for example, but in my case it's much higher just because I can devote so much time to it, and that's what I do here in these videos. I'm going to click puzzles, and we're going to do the best that we can. I am going to follow my checklist, which means that I'm going to look for checks, captures, threats. I'm going to try to evaluate how much danger I'm in before I decide on that move. And each of those has kind of a subcategories too that I won't go into until we get there. But first, let's look for checks. I'm playing with the black pieces. I do have a check here with my rook. I think that's the only check on the board. It looks like if I check with the rook, they're just going to take my knight. But if they took my knight, I would have a follow-up check, which would be with my other knight to b4. And then their only option would be to come forward toward my knight, at which point I would have two follow-up checks. One would be bringing the rook over into the corner, but then they would just take my second knight as well. So if I checked and they took my knight and I checked with my second knight, my other follow-up check would be to take this pawn. No, wait, that's not a check. Never mind. Did I miss something? I thought I saw another check there. If I check here and they take my knight and I check. Oh, they have to get out of check. Okay, and their only legal move is to come forward. Okay, that's what I missed. Yeah, then I check by taking this pawn, and then their only legal move would be to go back to where they were, in which case my rook to the corner would be mate, or come forward, in which case I think my rook to the corner would be mate. I think this is a mate in 3. I'm trying to evaluate if my opponent has any other options. Now, one thing, if I don't do one of those checks and I think, say I just moved a pawn or a bishop or something, I think my opponent is getting pretty close to checkmate right here on f7. Because of their bishop and their queen, I would only have one legal move. I would have to move over, and I think, yeah, they will have a mate in 2 if I don't checkmate them. So that's why it can't be a capture. It can't be a threat. It has to be checks, because I'm pretty sure they have mate in 2. I guess I could defend against that with something like this, but that's almost never the case in a puzzle. So I'm going to go with a check on d1. The king can't come forward because of my pawn. It can't go over because of the rook that's checking it. It would have to take the knight. Then check on b4 with my other knight, and it can't go back to their back rank because of my rook. It can't come over because the pawn would have to come forward. Only one legal move. Then if I check with the knight, it can't get off of that side file, the A file, because my knight from down there on C2 would be protecting B4, the square that it just came from. The pawn would still be protecting this, so the king would have to come forward again, and then my rook to the corner would be mate. Or, as I said, it would have to go backward again, in which case the rook to the corner would be mate. Let's try that. Okay. Don't think they have anything else after this other than moving the king forward. Okay, we're right so far. And then it has to be this, right? Because again, if I check in the corner, they take my knight. I could check again with the pawn, but then they could take my other pawn, and I wouldn't have any other follow-up check. So I think it has to be taking their pawn on c2, and the rook to the corner is mate. Wow, I'm happy I got that. Checkmates in 1 are usually pretty easy to see, and sometimes mates in 2 are easy to see. Mates in 3, at least for me, start getting pretty difficult. That's why when you get to the Sunday puzzle on chess.com, where it's like a forced mate in 7 or something, I'm not going to see those unless I know it's a puzzle. I don't know that I would have seen this in a game unless it was a long enough game where I had time to do what I just did. Although, one difference in a game is that I would have moved those pieces down there with the intention of attacking their king. And so maybe I would have already been looking for it. Who knows? Let's go on to the next one. I am playing with the black pieces, despite the queen being way down here, the white queen. This is another one of those where you always wonder, how did their queen get down in here and what was it doing? But let's look for checks. I have multiple checks in this position. And the one that was instinctive, the one that I almost said was probably it, was queen to h2. However, once I realized that there are other checks, like there's throwing away the queen here, there's throwing away the queen on f2, there's taking that pawn, which I think is also throwing away the queen. I realized that moving sideways is a check. And I think that's the most forcing. That's one of the ways that I evaluate checks is if there are multiple checks, which one is the most forcing? In other words, which one leaves only one legal move or only two, whereas some other checks leave 5 legal moves, and then you have no idea what the opponent's going to do. In this case, moving to queen to h2 would leave their king 2 legal moves, and if it stayed on the back rank, of course I could check again, but then it could come off the back rank, and then I'm facing their rook. And then I wouldn't have this check over here with the rook because their knight's guarding that square. So when I saw this one over here to the right, I realized that is the most forcing. The king cannot go over back to the h-file because my rook is still there. I don't think they can block that check with anything. Their rook, their knight, their bishop are all lined up there but can't do anything to get in the way. So I think their king would have to go to f1. And once it did, I'm pretty sure rook to the corner on h1 would be checkmate. Now, in my experience, it's a little rare to get checkmate puzzles this high in the ratings, but mates in 2s and mates in 3s maybe. You almost never see mates in 1s at this level, although we've seen a couple. But let's just evaluate real quick. Is there anything else they can do? I don't think that leaves them any other options. And here, I don't think they'll have any options. They can't come toward it. They can't come forward because of my queen. So let's try queen to e3. And if it's wrong, we'll find out why. And this has to be checkmate. Oh, they blocked with the knight. Well, I'll just take it with the rook, and that's checkmate. Okay. I almost took with the queen, but of course that would have allowed the king to get out this way, so it had to be taking with the rook. That's the rare checkmating puzzle at this level that goes all the way. We've run into quite a few where I had a mate in 3 or a mate in 2, and right before the last move, the puzzle ended. And it looks like chess.com might have fixed the glitch, because I noticed in my last video, I didn't mention it, but I did get the 5 points for the first puzzle. And in this one, it looks like I got 5 points for the first puzzle as well. It always says you do, but then once you get to the second puzzle, it's obvious that you didn't. But here, I've now gotten a total of 10 points, and that was 2 puzzles, right? I think it was. And at this rate, I might get more than my usual 4, so let's just keep going. This one's not going to be a mate in 2. But we will start by evaluating the checks. I think my only check is rook captures on d1, in which case they will take back with their other rook, I assume. But if I don't take their rook, they're going to take mine, right? They actually would have other ways to get out of that check, but I think capturing back would be their best one. Because, for example, they could block with the knight. They could block with the queen, but I think taking back with the rook would be the obvious choice there, because otherwise I would take their other rook too. But I don't know if that's the first move or not. That continues to leave my opponent with control over the open D file, which is the only completely open file. Okay. That doesn't seem very promising because the second thing I use to evaluate checks is, are there any follow-ups? So if I have multiple checks, I see which one's the most forcing. And once I've decided on a check, I look for follow-ups. And in this case, there's only one check. It's not that forcing because they have so many options and there's no good follow-up. So it might be something else. The second thing I look for is captures. Well, I mean, that is also a capture. It would be an even trade when they captured back with the rook. But again, what is the follow-up? Do I have some other threat? I haven't even gotten this other rook out yet. It looks like it's never moved. And this bishop, a light squared bishop, also looks like it has never moved. Now, one thing that I might consider doing in a game here, which is probably not the answer because this is a puzzle, I would probably consider developing this bishop. And the reason I would consider that is, of course, it develops the bishop. It protects this rook in case they decide to take. And it frees the other rook to get out from the A8 square. But I'm guessing that's not the answer because I've never seen a puzzle where a normal, non-threatening developing move is the answer. So maybe it's a threat rather than a capture or a check. For example, I could move this queen, this rook over to c5, which would threaten their queen. But then their queen's going to go somewhere. Where is it going to go? Here? Oh, wow. And I just realized that there is already a piece under threat here and another capture possible on the board. Wow, that took me far too long to see. What was that, 3.5 minutes? Okay, their knight is currently hanging. So maybe the answer is to take the rook. No, if I take the rook first, they have the opportunity to save the knight, don't they? What if I threatened the queen first, which forces the queen to move, and then take the knight? There might be something else here too that I'm not seeing. But it doesn't make sense to take the knight first because then they get my rook, right? So it makes sense to move the rook first. But if I just move the rook someplace kind of safe or defend it with my bishop as I suggested, then the knight escapes. That's why I think it might be threatening the queen and then taking the knight. But again, the queen's going to go somewhere and I don't know where it's going to go. It might line up with the rook, with its own rook in order to form kind of a battery down here. And then I might be in trouble. Or should I threaten the queen by moving the rook forward where this pawn would protect it? Oh, but then the pawn's not protecting the knight anymore. Yeah, no, that's not it, because I think then they get the pawn and the rook for their rook, and I'm not threatening the knight anymore. Okay, so back to this. What if they formed the battery with their rook, aiming for my d8 square? Now my rook wouldn't be guarding it anymore, only my queen is guarding it. In that case, I think if I moved the rook over and they formed the battery here, I think I would have to get my bishop off the back rank in order to free this other rook to protect d8. Sorry, I paused this so I wouldn't waste a bunch of your time, but I went through my checklist 2 or 3 other times and I came up with all the same moves. The only thing that I keep coming back to is the thing that I noticed too late, which is that this knight is under threat. But if I take it now, I lose my rook. So going back to checks and captures, which are the first two, I think if I take their rook, they'll take me with their rook, and then I'll take their knight. I think that's going to be the answer here. And I'm not sure why I didn't notice that before. Once I saw that the knight was under threat, I don't know what I was missing. I said something like, oh, they could do this, but they're not going to get the knight out of danger that way, because if they do, I'll take their other rook as well. So I think it has to be the check. That's more forcing than any of the other options that I came up with. For example, when I said threatening the queen, they just line up here, right? I think that's what they would do. I don't know what the bot would do, what this computer simulator would do in this situation, or what Stockfish would say is best. But in a game against a human, that's what I would expect them to do. Something like that, or possibly something like this, where they would pin my rook to my queen. But the battery is stronger. So get rid of the battery idea. This check, yes, it does leave them multiple legal moves, but the best one by far, I'm certain, is taking with the rook. And then I win their knight, and they don't have time to line up a battery against my d8 square yet, because their queen's not there. If they move their queen there, then of course I get my bishop off the back rank, and then I have 2 pieces protecting the d8 square. So that's the logic that I'm sticking to. I'm going to try the check, and hopefully that will be right. Okay, let's do it. Okay, that was right. And I don't think anything else makes sense right now other than taking the knight. That leaves me up a full piece, and I'm currently not in danger of being checkmated. They have this check, but it's not a threat right now. They're a move away from having a threat, right? They will have a threat after they put their queen over there on d2, but it's not a threat yet. So I think it has to be taking the knight. We'll find out. Oh, there's another move. Okay, the queen has come down here, threatening the rook. Okay, I didn't expect that, which is, of course, one of the things we're supposed to check before we make our move. What can they do in response? I honestly thought taking the knight was going to be the end of the puzzle, so I didn't do that. But that's, of course, what we should always do before making our move, is what would the opponent do? In here, I can't move the bishop up to threaten the queen, because it would just take it. Or what about if I just move the rook over one? Then I would be, is that it? Just moving the rook to b8? Because they still haven't quite coordinated these 2 pieces on the d8 square yet. So I don't think I'm in much danger if I just move the rook to b8. It looks like anything else I do is going to lose either the rook or the bishop. That's the way that I'm choosing to look at this. If I move the bishop anywhere besides b7, they're going to take my rook. And if I move the bishop to b7, they're going to take my bishop. And if I do anything else with any other piece, they're going to take my rook, right? And I don't see any other danger here. The obvious danger from their last move is to threaten my rook. So yeah, they're getting either my bishop or my rook unless I move the rook. And then I don't think they can get either one. But let's find out. Rook to b8. Okay, and that was the end. All right. Wow. Yeah, that one took me a little longer maybe than it should have. But it was rated over 2200, and the pass rate is barely over 50%. So I don't feel too bad. I have time for at least one more. If it takes a long time, just one more. But hopefully more than that. Let's keep going. Okay, as always, we will look for checks first. I have already seen a couple of checks in this puzzle. I have 3 different checks with the queen, only one of which looks any good to me, and that, of course, is this one here on d3, which is very forcing. It leaves, I'm pretty sure, only one legal move, but then the question becomes, what's the follow-up? There's also this check with the knight over here on g4. That leaves the same legal move, I think, because my queen's cutting off all of this, my pawn's hitting that, my bishop's protecting here. So if I check with the knight, or I check with the queen, I think either way, neither one of those can be blocked or captured. Either way, the king is forced back. Wait, if I move my knight there, wait, is that mate? I just said earlier that there's almost no mates in ones at this level. Is this a mate in one? What am I missing? Because I'm not in check, right? And I am playing with the black pieces. I know it took me a second, but I think that's checkmate. They don't have any pieces guarding that square. Their king can't move out here because of my queen. Can't move here because of the bishop. And of course, their own pieces are there. My knight from g4 would be hitting both of those squares, and my pawn's guarding that one. I think this is a mate in one. Oh, deep breath, but I'm going to try knight to g4. Checkmate? Oh, that was checkmate. And that's rated 2260, a mate in one puzzle. Wow. Okay, well, because that was mate in one and therefore fairly short, I do definitely have time for another puzzle. Hopefully it'll be another mate in one and I can just keep going. Let's see what we get on the next one. Okay, again, let's look for checks. I can check with my bishop down there, but I don't think that's good. It's not very forcing, is it? I mean, not any more forcing than any check. They could capture back with the queen. The king could move out of check. The king could move out of check other ways. And that I think is my only check in this puzzle. And because it's not very forcing, because they would have at least 4 legal moves after that check. Oh, they could capture with the king for that matter. They can capture 2 different ways, or they can move out of check 3 different ways. So 5 possible moves after that. That's why that's probably not it, because usually when there's that many possible moves after a check, it makes it really hard to evaluate because you have to consider each one. What if they take with the queen? Then what would I do? Would I capture their rook? What if they take with the king? Would I then capture their rook? What if they move maybe I should capture the rook first? I mean, that seems like the next most obvious thing. Also, while I was saying that, I just noticed that their bishop is what's preventing me from checking here with the queen or the bishop, because their bishop's in the way. I figure if I capture their rook with my rook, they're going to take back with the bishop. That's what I think. Then I thought I would check here with my bishop, which would be a double attack, because my queen would be pointed at the bishop and my bishop would be pointed at their king, right? So if I check here, they might not take my rook. That happens. Sometimes they don't do the expected thing. They have lots of other legal moves here, but I think they would take my rook. And that looks like an even trade until I check with my bishop. And then if they just, move out of check, then I take their bishop. But their other option would be to block with the bishop, in which case I would just take it too. And I would go up a piece. And I don't think I'm in threat, after that, I don't think I'm in threat of being checkmated, right? Because if we go here and I check, and I assume they move out of check, and then I would take their rook, they could check me back here, but then I could just block that check with my queen. That looks really promising, and I don't see a way out of it for them. So I'm going to try it. Oh, it would be bad to fail the last puzzle in a video. And yeah, this will be the last one because my time is up. But let's try taking the rook first and see what my opponent does. They did take with the bishop, so it's got to be this. And I don't think it's the queen. The reason I don't think it's the queen is because then when they get out of check, I can't win their bishop. So that's why I think it's check with the bishop, which is a discovered attack on their bishop. So let's try that. That was it, and I'm going to take their bishop. Okay. Oh, and I got 6 points for that. That one was rated over 2300, so I'm really happy that I got that right. But again, it came down to following the checklist and evaluating what would happen after each one of those moves. So this went really well. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you got something out of this one way or another. Either way, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.